Okay, so we have gone way back in time, and just like this is like, seems too easy, Mr. Server. You just add 18. But I'm going to make you think about, why do you add 18? Remember, it's PEMDAS. If you're going to solve something, you're doing PEMDAS, but you're doing it backwards. Notice we didn't start by dividing everything to get rid of the multiply divide. We start with the add subtracts. Okay? And so you start by adding or subtracting something. And then you got that. And then you do the multiplier divides. Done. That's how you do it, right? It is. So how does this at all relate to completing the square? I'll show you. Let's say we had this. Y equals x minus 1 squared plus 7. That's what you get when you're done completing the square. You get that, and you have the vertex. But if you had to solve it, well, what do you want to solve it for? It's already solved for y. If you want to solve an equation, you're finding the x-intercepts. If you're finding the x-intercepts, you set y to 0. Everybody put a 0 right there. And now we would be solving this thing. Solving it for what? Solving it for x. And what we're finding is the x-intercepts, because we set y equal to 0. That's the solutions also. Remember how they got 4 names? X-intercepts, zeros, solutions. All right, so how would we solve this? Remember PEMDAS? Would we start with the parentheses? No. We would start with, is there any add or subtract we could do? Is there? If we're trying to solve for x, what would you do? I hope you're saying minus 7 in your head. Negative 7 equals, parentheses, x minus 1 squared. Is there any multiply or divide that could get us closer right now? Seems like a trick question. There isn't any multiply or divide. We've already done the add or subtract. There isn't any multiply or divide we could do to get closer to the answer. So then we got to deal with an exponent. Do you get how that's the next up the chain? So how do you get rid of the squared? Square root. And I know some of you are thinking, can't square out a negative. Good, but do you remember that we, in this class, have to deal with that? We can't just say, oh, no answer. It means that we have an answer that's got an I in it. How about the square root of x minus 1? Did anybody remember to put the absolute value bars? Anybody? One person. Nice work, one person. It's so easy to forget, isn't it? When you square root a variable, you have the absolute value of it. And now this one, I think some of you might even be stumped here. It's a weekend, and so you've forgotten about math for 3 days. So did anybody know it was I root 7? That's what it is. You can't simplify root 7 anymore, but you can get the negative out of there and call it I. So I times the square root of 7 equals absolute value of, this looks really weird. Well, welcome to honors higher algebra. Do you remember that these break into 2 equations? I call it the splits. So then x minus 1 is I root 7, and x minus 1 is, the only thing that changes is right here, the green part, negative I root 7. The 2 equations are identical except the green part. And if you can't solve and get the 2 answers from there, you aren't in the right class. You should be able to solve for x here and here. Take a second. This is as easy as it seems. Do something to both sides. Solve. And then see if you can squish it down into one clean answer. And it'll have a plus and a minus in it. I'm going to pause for a second to see if you can finish this. I feel a little bit like the eagle who's teaching the baby eagle how to hunt. I did most of the work here. The eagle would bring the fish back to the nest. Do you get that's pretty much the hard part. From there, the little baby just has to like eat the fish. All right, I've killed this thing almost completely. You just have to finish it off. So I hope you added 1 to both sides here. I mostly got this one done for you. and you have 1 plus I root 7. And on the other one, we add 1, and we have 1 minus I root 7. Now, you can reverse those if you want, but if you put it the way I did, then you can really easily see it's 1 plus and minus I root 7. Who had that right? Nice.
Could you just put y equals plus or minus I root 7 plus 1?
You could, but then you're putting the imaginary part first. Do you remember that deal where the real part's supposed to be first? So you really should have the 1 first. Now, we actually have sometimes arguments amongst the math teachers of how harsh we should be on that. But just know that's the right way. I might have been able to accept it if it was backwards. But I know you'll get it right if you put the real part first. Okay, so what does that have to do with anything? We just solved an equation. We just found the imaginary solutions to a graph. That means that the graph went like this. It didn't touch the x-axis. It didn't have real x-intercepts. But we can still find the imaginary solutions. Like you can't see them. They're not like here and here. You know what I mean? It's kind of a weird concept. Could we have done it with the quadratic formula? Yep. Could we have done it with graphing? No, because you can't see them. Could you do it with factoring? It's hard to factor things. I did teach you once. Let's see if anybody can recall it. How would you solve this one? Normally you'd say you can't factor that. But I said you can if you know what you're doing. Remember how to factor this in a special way? So factoring can work, but it's tricky. Complete the square was what we left off doing, and all of a sudden we're doing this weird thing. It's related. You'll see. Who remembered it was x plus and x minus 5i? Anybody have that? Sweet. Now, I did say before that some of you would catch that and some of you wouldn't, and it wasn't that big of a deal because you could solve this another way. What's the other way I could get 5i and negative 5i? By using the quadratic formula or by just subtracting 25 on both sides. X squared equals negative 25 and solving. Go ahead and solve that. Just solve it the normal way. Ethan, what do I do with both sides?
Square root.
Yep. And did you remember? You'll know if you know.
25 and negative 1 for square root.
You didn't remember. You didn't never said the magic words. Keenan, you remember?
Yeah.
What?
X equals plus or minus 5i.
Okay, but you never said the magic words. Not please, by the way. Yes?
Absolute value.
Yes! And then we'll get those answers you guys were saying, but this is just 5i. That's what's supposed to happen right there. Some of you still haven't got it through your heads that when you square root a squared, like a variable there, it comes out to the absolute value. I could prove it to you if we had graphing calculators here today, which we're not going to take the time to do, but if you graph this, it comes out to a V shape, which is an absolute value. You'd see if you graph that this is an absolute value. Why does that matter? Because that's what brings you two answers. X equals 5i, x equals negative 5i, and yes, it's okay to just jump right to that. But you have to show the absolute value, otherwise you don't really understand why there's two answers. I always want to go back to the most fundamental one. Long time ago, you were taught this, and you were told this, and this is where they screwed you over right here. Because they said that's the square root, and they just told you it was regular x, and it wasn't. And then they just were like, oh, but don't forget there's two answers, plus and minus. It doesn't make any sense. Square root of 25 isn't plus and minus. It's only one thing. Square root of 25 is 5. And it's this part they were avoiding when they taught you that. Because that's true. Square root of x squared is absolute value of x. And then that breaks into two things. X equals 5 and x equals negative 5. And yes, the final answer is plus and minus 5. But how you get there matters. Because some kids still think that the square root of 25 is two things. But it's not. The square root of 25 is one thing, it's 5. Try it. Ask ChatGPT, what's the square root of 25? It's not going to tell you two things. It's going to just tell you 5. Side note, ChatGPT is super powerful. Holy crap powerful. It can do amazing things. And if you haven't checked it out, it's like you're missing out on the future. It is going to be huge. You will use it in your job. Guaranteed. Guaranteed you'll use it in your job. Otherwise, you won't be able to be as productive as the guy next to you who's using it. Okay, it's going to be a big deal. But if it isn't ChatGPT, it could be the new competitor. If I hear about what happened over the weekend. Grok. There's now a third competitor. There's Bard. That came from Google. There's ChatGPT. Oops. GetGPT. Sorry, I was thinking about the G. ChatGPT. And now there's Grok. ChatGPT has been worked on now for 10 years before they finally released it to everybody, and everybody's like, holy crap, that's pretty amazing. And then Bard came on board really quick after that because Google is like, holy crap, we got to get ours out there quick, or ChatGPT is going to like eat our lunch. Everybody's going to stop using Google. They're going to ChatGPT it. So they launched their Bard, which was not bad, but they'd been working on it for like 5 years. This one, they've only been working on it for 4 months compared to 10 years, and they're close. So this one's growing incredibly fast. Like 4 months. 4 months ago, they didn't have anything. They started with like 4 engineers in a room. And now Grok is close to ChatGPT 4. It's already better than the free version of ChatGPT. But the one you pay $20 a month for is ChatGPT 4. Grok is already really close to that. So that's amazing in 4 months. So anyway, get used to the new word. There's going to be people that are going to be saying, did you grok it? So, all right. Yes, you know the reference?
Yeah.
It's from?
I can't remember the book name, but I know what
Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Yes, that's where it comes from. That, in case, it could be that there's another grok out there in the world, but this one is a reference to Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. There was something in that book that made the owner of this thing say, I'm going to call it grok. And it could be pronounced grok or grok, but the argument right now is that everybody thinks they're going to go with grok, G-R-O-K, grok. Okay, so anyway, that's going to be like ChatGPT. I know how many of you had heard of ChatGPT before? Raise your hand if you had. Okay, now this is the competitor that's growing really fast. So it's like, yes, ChatGPT's still ahead, but okay. So anyways, let's get to this one. Everybody go to this page. What's my favorite saying? If you can factor it, you should. So you factor it. But then, of course, the challenge comes when you can't factor them. I think this one factors. Still the best way. Could you use quadratic formula? Yes, that always works. Could you graph it and see what the x-intercepts are? Yes, it works, but it's really slow. But this is fast. It's got to be a plus and a minus. Always do the signs. Because that's negative, has to be a plus and a minus. And last, it has to be a 6 and a 3. And I think I did it right. Anybody verify my answer? Okay, cool. Then you get the answers are negative 6 and 3. Those would be the x-intercepts, the roots, the zeros. Okay, so why are we doing this new way? Because sometimes you can't factor it. Do you get if this had been a 17 right there, it wouldn't have factored? So let's do that. X squared plus, but wait, I know what's coming, and it'd be a lot easier to just make it 4x plus 17. If you know what I just did, you'll know that I'm setting you up for, can you complete the square still, or did you lose it over the weekend? I just changed it on purpose. And I made this even because you remember that deal where you do half and then you square it? Does that ring a bell? And then you move the 17 over to give yourself space to work. See if you can complete the square. And then I'll explain why we're doing this. Okay, half of the 4 is 2. 2 squared is 4. And then you remember the negative 4? Does that ring a bell? Cool. Then this is x plus 2 quantity squared, and then that is plus 13. I think I did it right. Anybody else get that answer? Cool. Now I know the vertex. But, Mr. Server, you were solving it. That's different than the vertex. The vertex is not the x-intercepts. No, you're right, it's not. I know the vertex is negative 2, 13. Yay for me. But I don't need that. I need the x-intercepts. So can you fill in this sentence? The x-intercept is where y equals 0. So everybody put a 0 right here. And I just showed you how to solve it a second ago. Remember PEMDAS? Do you start dealing with the P and the E right away? No, you don't. Do you do the M and the D? Nope. You start with the A and the S. You add or subtract. So you should have started by subtracting 13 from both sides. And you have negative 13 equals x plus 2 quantity squared. And then do you know what to do? Keenan, what do I do to both sides?
Square root.
Yep. I've pounded on this a few times. Please try to do this next step right. Did you have I root 13? Good. Did you have the absolute value of x plus 2? Then you can do the splits, and you'll solve it from there. See if you can do it. We are solving. We're getting the x-intercepts, not the vertex. So that thing we were doing was not only good for finding the vertex, it can then lead you to solving it for the x-intercepts. Those are the other big things. There's really only 2 things you care about on a parabola. The vertex and the x-intercepts. And that vertex form that we had can be solved. So x plus 2 is I root 13. Notice the first one you write is exactly the same as what you had, but without the absolute value bars. The second one is identical to the first one, except for one little negative. I'll just make it blue. Otherwise, those 2 equations are identical. It's just that one has to also be negative, and then you solve it the rest of the way. Go ahead and finish this off. Write your answer in the way where it's like the real number first, like it's not going to be 4, plus or minus the square root of 13. It's going to be something like that. Negative 2 plus I root 13 and negative 2 minus I root 13. So this must be really not a 4, of course. It was a negative 2. And there's an I here. That is hardcore algebra. Anybody get all the way to that answer without any help? Cool. So let's go to the third page. So what if the thing doesn't factor? Well, then you give up. Now, could use a quadratic formula. It would work. But what we're going to do is we're going to use the what to solve it? 3 words. Complete the square. I'm going to abbreviate it with CTS. Use complete the square to solve it. All right, so complete the square. How does that go again? You move the... I'm going to put the 0 on the left side. That's personally how I like to do it. Then I like to leave myself a bunch of room to work like this. And then I put my parentheses like that. All I did is like rearrange it a little bit. Now see if you can do the complete the square and then solve it. I'm going to pause for a second while you give this a shot. This is some serious math, and it makes sense. We've been doing complete the square now for 2 days, like 2 class days in a row. You can't just do it again. We need to complete the square and then solve it. So you're gonna like use an absolute value in there. Mason, use the half and square thing and tell me what to put here and here. Plus 16 minus 16. Excellent. Then if you can factor it, you should. X plus, not 16, not 8, but 4. Remember, this is the square root of that. That's squared, and then these go together, and that makes negative 34? Have I got that right? Okay. Seems like I should stop, because in the old days, like literally on Friday, you'd have been done. You found vertex form. Jackson, how do I take the next step now that we're solving?
I would say we would add 34.
You are correct. 34 equals x plus 4 quantity squared. Fiona, next step, trying to get the x alone. Square root. Now, square root of 34 doesn't work out nice, but is there anything that's like simplifying in there, like square, like 16? Does 16 go into 34? No. 17 goes into it, but that doesn't really help, right? So I think we should just leave it as square root of 34. I mean, yeah, one of the best things to check is, does 2 go into it twice? 2 goes into it and you get 17, but then 2 doesn't go into that twice. Why would 2 going in twice help? Because that means 4 goes into it. So to check if 4 goes into it, just check if 2 goes in twice. Like 40, you know, 4 obviously goes into it, but try putting in 2 and then it has a 20 and then you can go put 2 into the 20, right? If 2 goes in twice, then that means 4 goes in. So bottom line, we can't simplify the square root of 34 anymore. So then we have to break this up because it's an absolute value now into 2 parts. And you solve it and you get your answer. Catherine, tell me the first equation here once those bars drop.
Is x equals negative 4.
You're solving it all the way. I don't need you to do that. Just x plus 4.
X plus 4 equals square root of 4.
Yep. And the other one is identical except for one thing. So let's go with, who do I almost never call on? Zina.
It would be x plus 4 equals negative square root of x.
Perfect. Alex, next one. Know what to do?
X equals
Just tell me what to do on each side here. We're going to like do something here.
subtract.
There you go. Subtract the 4, subtract the 4, subtract the 4, subtract the 4. Now you can hit me with the final answers.
X equals negative 4 plus or minus square root of 34.
Ooh, you can jump right to the end, which I like. You're absolutely right. There we go. Do you get that there was no negative under the square root, and so there's no I? If there would have been a negative under the square root, you would have taken it out and put I. All right. So, I'm going to pull an audible and say, I don't think we need to do all of the rest of these. I think we can get to your homework, because these aren't that hard. I do want to like remind you of a couple little things on these slides. Like here, you would have factored out the 3. Would you have remembered to look to see that there was a 3 in the front? Get that 3 factored out. That would have been very smart. On to this next one. We're on the 5th page. Okay, that one's weird. Maybe we should look at that one. Yeah, there's a 2 and everything, but it equals 12 right now. So I don't want to divide the 2 out of everything first. What do you think I want to do first?
So
Subtracted 12.
Yes, subtract 12. Very good. Negative 2x squared minus 16x minus 22 equals 0. Why do we want it to equal 0? Because if the y equals 0, we're finding the x-intercepts. And this is where the y would be, and we want the y to be 0 so that we can find the x-intercepts. Then they're still all even numbers. Now is the time to factor out that negative 2. But wait, do you remember doing this on Friday where we just factor it out of the first two numbers? I'm going to finish this one with you. You better stay with me on this one. We're only going to factor the negative 2 out of the first two numbers, and it'll be x squared. And we factor out the negative 2 out of negative 16, and I get 8. But be careful, is it positive or negative 8? You're factoring out a negative 2. It's positive 8. Let me show you why. Because if I go this times this, it makes my negative 2x squared come back. If I do negative 2 times positive 8, I will get my negative 16 back. Another way to say it is if you're dividing out a negative, these both have to switch their signs. Okay. And then I'm moving the 22 over. You remember this part? And then we do the half and square thing. You know what I'm talking about? I should have probably reminded you about this kind. You factor out the negative 2, and then we do the half and square. And so then half of 8 is 4. 4 squared is 16. And negative 16. And then is anybody going to remember? Remember? What am I talking about?
You have to multiply the negative 16 by the negative 2.
Yes, it's so easy to forget that will magnify this by negative 2. So this has to be multiplied by negative 2. Whew. And if you can factor it, you should. That's positive 32 minus 22 is 10. All of that work, and now we start solving it. Holy crap. Now we subtract 10 from both sides. Then we divide by negative 2 on both sides. Then we have an absolute value. This could seriously be the longest problem we've ever done in this class. We started with that. We set it equal to 0. Good idea for any quadratic. Then we're doing the complete the square process with the factoring, which is extra hard. Then you got to remember this negative 2 gets multiplied here because that negative 2 right there. Then we got to do this whole new thing. From here, I've pretty much finished it. You just have to finish the rest. It's almost there. And then would you please compare your answers with the kid next to you? There's no I in the answer this time. Finish it from there, if nothing else. I rarely get to say this. I think that's the hardest problem we've ever done in this class. Check with the kid next to you, see if we get the same thing. Did you square root and square root? Did you remember absolute value?
Take out the two here. You can square root of 4 and then square root of 5, and you take the 2 out. 2 and square root of 5, and that equals the absolute value of. My ADHD brain is at full power right now.
And I'm going to put them both together for a final answer of -4 plus and minus square root of 5. Anybody have that before I did? Cool, at least half of you. That was the hardest math problem, but we've done. All right, so let's actually open up that worksheet. It is a Schoology quiz. Let's start it together. And you'll have a healthy amount of time to work on it in class, which would be really smart. We're not going to do this problem. It's okay. We're just going to go right to the homework. All right, Ethan, number 1. Are you there yet? I'll come back. Oh, yes? Yeah, you read it.
X equal 2 squared equals 12.
Like that?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So first off, I got to look at that and go, what do you want? Do you want this to be like vertex form, or do you want to solve it, or what?
You solve for the x's.
Ah, solve. Okay. So then I'm going to start by square rooting both sides. Some kids think you have to multiply it all out. You do not. You want to use square root to get rid of squared. And then you've got to remember absolute value. Now you have to remember how to simplify square root of 12. I always make it 2 square roots. Don't try to do these in your head. I've seen too many kids just try to go like, oh, it's 4 root 3. And it's not. It's the square root of 4 and the square root of 3, which is 2 root 3. Don't try to do it in your head. Do those 2 square roots in between. And now it's close. Just got to do the split. Jaden, what do you say? Split. Oh, sorry. Using the wrong name for a kid. Apologize. I'm going to just switch to somebody completely different. Let's see who I'm going to talk to. I think Carter. I have. There's 2 Carters. Carter Johnson. Tell me the next step. We're doing the splits here.
Split normal so that it would be x minus 2 equals 2 times square root of 3.
Perfect.
X minus 2 equals negative 2 times square root of 3.
Perfect. And everybody can hopefully finish it from there. I'm totally good with you jumping to the end and putting them both together. It's a positive 2, and it's a plus and a minus, the 2 root 3. Now, there's always a kid who's like, did you realize you could factor that, Mr. Server? Can you factor it? Yes, I'm totally fine. I have said if you can factor it, you should. How could I mark you wrong on a test if you factored? The only exception would be if they were saying it needs to be in general form. Because then if you factor it, you're obviously putting it in factored form. But this is not required. I'm just noting, yeah, there's a 2 in both parts. So sure, I'm always going to be good with you factoring it unless it's like not supposed to be in factored form. All right. Good, that was number 1. Get that? Here's the final answers. And how would you write that? Well, this is a Schoology quiz. The other teachers aren't as high on factoring as I am. So I guarantee you that's not going to be one of the choices that Schoology would look for. If you had it right like that and you came up to me and said, Mr. Server, this marked it wrong, and all I did was factor it, I'd give you the points back. But let's put it in this way. There is no such thing as a plus and minus sign, right? So you either, if they gave you 2 blanks, is that what they did?
Yeah.
Then you'd go 2 plus 2 SQRT 3. And we usually have it with parentheses or without. And the other one would be 2 minus 2 SQRT. Parentheses is the preferred way. I think every teacher that makes the key will put it in parentheses. Some will put it in both ways. All right. This is the part where you have a whole bunch of work time. That's all I have for the video for today.